sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. I'm Virginia Jones. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm not a therapist, but my sister's one, so it's pretty much the same thing.
Hi, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but my main credit is sister to humor hero, Virginia Jones.
We would like to thank everybody. We have just hit 30,000 downloads, and we have been informed that we are in the top 2% of podcasts in the whole world.
Thank you for your listenership. I was doing some research on how to boost your podcast. Tell all of your friends and family to listen to this podcast.
If you know anyone who has ears, if anyone ever mentions a podcast to you, you go, oh, you know, it's a great one. My sister's a therapist.
If anyone ever mentions that they've listened to a podcast in their lifetime, mention My Sister's a Therapist podcast.
If you see anybody just wearing headphones casually, go, hey, I bet you listen to podcasts. Did you ever listen to My Sister's a Therapist?
Hey, you have headphones on. You're probably listening to My Sister's a Therapist podcast, but if not, have you thought about it?
For people who listen to every episode, and you're my favorite, you know that for our 1-year anniversary, Laura gifted me a sweatshirt with a beautiful portrait of Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn on it. And that's all it says. It's got Eddie Murphy in that character, and it says Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn. And I was wearing it in public, and a woman said, nice sweatshirt. And I'm like, is
she insulting me?
Is it possible that this person has listened to the podcast or is a huge Trading Places fan, or 3 is a huge Eddie Murphy fan, or 4, none of the above? She just thinks it's funny that I have a homeless guy on my sweatshirt. What is happening? It was a journey. Laura, I know you like for me to tell the people whose episode it is. Who picks the topic? Who's the one working behind the scenes? Who's turning the wheels? And
who's done all the legwork? Yeah, this week it's me.
I've done nothing.
You're just resting on your laurels. Hey, if anyone's curious, Laurel Crowned is where my name comes from.
She's got a crown of laurels because she's so smart.
And Greek or something.
She's smart and she's Greek. Laura, what is our topic this week? You haven't been resting on your laurels.
Our topic this week is the history of romance.
Oh, that's a very special topic for a certain special holiday.
Virginia, do you know where the word romance comes from?
It sounds like it has the word Roman in it. I'm guessing that people were having sex with Romans.
Possibly. According to Britannica, the old French word roman, with a Z on the end, originally meant the speech of the people, or this is what I like, the vulgar tongue.
Right. Because if you were a patrician, you were speaking, I guess, French.
Yes. I was thinking it was about saying filthy things with your mouth.
It frequently in the Middle Ages and beyond, the person who was the ruler of a country would not be from there. And so you had a king of England who spoke only German. So there's the English common language of the common a-holes in the street. And then there's the patrician language, which is Latin or whatever language the king speaks.
It came from the Latin word romanis, meaning written in the vernacular, in contrast with the written form of literary Latin.
So romance comes from a word for the language of the people.
Yes.
Vox populi.
Correct.
And here we're talking about Valentine's Day, or as the Romans used to call it, Lupercalia, which is, I think, a wolf festival. And it means, why is every animal around us having sex? A popular 18th century Valentine form was a homemade love letter puzzle. The writer intricately folded the paper, writing a different sentiment in each section. As the beloved unfolded the Valentine, her lover's feelings were revealed. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. When feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace, I love thee to the level of everyday's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. This is an old poem because I don't see anybody turning from praise.
I really thought this was Shakespeare.
Right. It does. It seems like a sonnet, but it is an Elizabeth Barrett Browning poem.
It is a sonnet. This came from an article from the National Women's History Museum, The History of Romance. Here are some things about romance through the ages. In ancient times, many of the first marriages were by capture. not by choice. How romantic.
Romance.
That's romance. When there was a scarcity of nubile women, I love that word choice, men raided other villages for wives. Frequently, the tribe from which a warrior stole a bride would come looking for her, and it was necessary for the warrior and his new wife to go into hiding to avoid being discovered. According to an old French custom, as the moon went through all its phases, the couple drank a brew called metheglin, which was made from honey. Hence, we get the word honeymoon. Isn't that horrific?
It is horrific. This is a tale as old as time.
Tale as old as time, kidnapping your wife. That is also the tale of Beauty and the Beast. So, fellas, if you're looking for a lady, just kidnap somebody and then make her drink some weird honey drink. That sounds like phlegm.
People get very upset in modern times when women are kidnapped and essayed, but that used to be how you got married. That's just how it would happen.
It's beautiful. Some of the Nordic countries have courtship customs involving knives. For example, in Finland, when a girl came of age, her father let it be known that she was available for marriage. The girl would wear an empty sheath attached to her girdle. If the suitor liked the girl, he would put a puukko knife in the sheath, which the girl would keep if she was interested.
What do you think that's a symbol for?
I don't know. It's very unclear.
My old Swedish vocal coach, now she was not teaching me any kind of Swedish singing. She was just a regular vocal coach, but she was Swedish AF. And she told me a funny story.
How does that work? Was she wearing the flag or something?
Yeah, she had Stockholm Syndrome, the whole bit. She, in her spare time, sang for Swedish black metal bands, or had sung for. And she had dated a Swedish black metal guy. And when they were dating, he gave her a knife and said, "Because you are my woman, it is my job to protect you. But when I am not around, I want you to have this knife to protect yourself." And I said, "Wow, that's romantic." And then I asked her, "When you broke up, did he take the knife back?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, no, he took the knife back."
I don't care what happens to you after we break up.
But that's funny that ties directly into Nordic custom. That's not a modern thing, because it seems so strange to me because I'm not Nordic. He was echoing the traditions from thousands of years ago.
I guess a man's never given me a knife. One of my wives gave me a knife.
Well, that's nice. I guess a man's never really loved us.
And I think a sheath, that's where the word vagina comes from.
Wink, wink. Yes.
Nudge, nudge, say no more. Speaking of sheaths, chivalrous gentlemen in England often sent a pair of gloves to their true loves. If the woman wore the gloves to church on Sunday, it signaled her acceptance of the proposal.
Oh, that's hot.
Super hot.
Do you remember in school, you would fold the origami love note?
Absolutely. Well,
Give it to somebody and you unwrap it and it's little cramped little kid handwriting about how I noticed you in science class. You rolled your paper into a big long strip and then you fold it at 45-degree angles. Fold it until it basically made a little square, and you tie one leg under the other and it made a nice little knot. And that was your secret love knot.
Well, that's fun. In some parts of 18th century Europe, a biscuit or small loaf of bread was broken over the head of the bride as she emerged from the church. Unmarried guests scrambled for the pieces, which they then placed under their pillows to bring the dreams of the one they would someday marry. This custom is believed to be the precursor of the wedding cake.
The wedding cake, throwing it on heads.
I've never jumped to the ground trying to get crumbs. That's pretty homotastic.
Isn't that what all single women are doing at weddings? Just trying to gather up some crumbs. What's left? What's left over? She got the good one. What are his friends doing?
We're hoovering for crumbs out here in the wedding streets. In some African cultures, long grasses are braided together and used to tie the hands of the groom and bride together to symbolize their union. Delicate twine is used in the Hindu Vedic wedding ceremonies to bind one of the bride's hands to one of the hands of the groom. In Mexico, the practice of having a ceremonial rope loosely placed around both of the necks of the bride and groom bind them together.
That's interesting because hand fasting, I know it as a Celtic tradition, and it's something that Goths do when they're
fasting.
Hand fasting is the thing of tying your hands together during the wedding ceremony. It's the origin of the phrase "tie the knot."
Oh, all right.
And my ex-husband did this with his first wife because they were pretentious. I want to point out, before we move on to Victorian times, I was talking to a friend of mine about romance as an idea. And like a lot of women, she likes a romance novel. She likes to insert herself into that fantasy. And she's sad about a very wonderful man that she's married to, but they've been together for 20 years. Some of the juice runs out of the orange. And
Not a
she's like,
phrase that people use.
it's certainly a phrase that I just made up. She's like, are married men ever romantic? And we looked it up. What I found was that romance is a trick, because in between the time where you would just kidnap your wife from a village and now, women would pick their husband based on where he was in life. And when a man didn't have a lot of wealth, particularly if he was a knight, basically a soldier for the king, he would instead do romance. This is a thing that men have used to trick women into marrying men who didn't have much.
Pavo scum.
This is something that Pavo scum have used to say, look, I don't have what that guy has, but I have feelings.
And you can't get a job and you have no access to resources. So I hope these feelings
Are going to
keep
be
the fire warm in the house and your belly full.
We think of romance as a good thing in our society, and I think it is, but I think it originated from a trick to get women to consider men with less means.
A manipulation, absolutely. Basically, the 19th century is when it really started to kick off. So tell us more about that.
During the Victorian era, romantic love became viewed as the primary requirement for marriage, and courting became more formal. You wouldn't just wear a glove to church. Almost an art form among the upper classes. An interested gentleman could not simply walk up to a young lady and begin a conversation. Even after being introduced, it was still some time before it was considered appropriate for a man to speak to a lady or for a couple to be seen together. Once they had been formally introduced, if the gentleman wished to escort the lady home, he would present his card to her. At the end of the evening, the lady would look over her options and choose who would be her escort. She would notify the lucky gentleman by giving him her own card, requesting that he escort her home. Almost all courting took place in the girl's home under the eye of watchful parents. I would like that. I would like
that too. Make an effort, man.
I would like to go to a dance, be given a bunch of cards by horny guys wearing tailcoats, and then get to make my selection.
It was very much in the hands of the woman, which I think is great. And I think we do need more of that.
And Victorian era comes right after a very prominent time for romance novels, Regency, the Jane Austen time, when women of means spent all of their day needle pointing on fainting couches and trying to get proposed to. And people would propose to each other who were strangers. Well, I hope he's a good husband. I met him 2 weeks ago. We've been to a couple parties. I guess I'll spend my whole life with him.
Why not? I don't have other options. If you've ever watched Bridgerton, you'll realize that it's pretty tricky out there.
And that is a criticism that I have heard people make of women in Regency novels. That's all they care about. That's all they're focused on. It's their only way out of their parents' house, for one. And two, they have nothing else to concern themselves with. They're not allowed to work. They have hobbies. And then it's just trying to make yourself the best and the most attractive lady at the ball so that the handsomest guy will ask you to dance. I want to take this opportunity to shout out my new friends from Austin, Texas. I was just at San Francisco Sketch Fest and I worked with an improv group called Jane Austin Improv, but the Austin is spelled like Austin. And they are fantastic. Not to do a spoiler, but they do a Regency dance. And it's very funny and they look great. And if you are in the Austin, Texas area, as I know a couple of you are, you should look up Jane Austin Improv because I don't usually post up for improv, but they were great.
Mark Manson wrote an article, The Brief History of Romance. The first commercial Valentines sold in the United States were produced by Mount Holyoke graduate Esther Howland. Following her college graduation in 1847, she began to produce and sell fancy paper Valentines. In 1850, she expanded her operation, hiring local men to craft elaborate creations with ribbon, glitter, and paper lace in an assembly line fashion. She ran her New England Valentine Company until 1881. Go, Esther!
Way to go. And these were really sometimes very beautiful, but a lot of the Valentines that grew out of this from the 20s and 30s are really funny. They're great illustrations. I had someone give me one with a man wearing a hat that's been broken over his head. It says, "I love you, and I'm not just talking through my hat." And they're great. I think we need more of that.
Let's bring those back. Where's Esther Howland now? Come on.
I think I know where Esther Howland is. I don't know specifically geographically where, but I think I can tell you as far as the topsoil location, top or bottom, I can tell you where she is.
I don't know if you know this, but a lot of women's eligibility for marriage became tied to their appearance. You used to be able to be an uggo and get married. But
Right, because people still wanted to have families.
so women's eligibility for marriage became increasingly tied to their appearance and social ability. Though wealth and familial connections remained important factors to prospective partners, men took the lead in partner selection, choosing which women to pursue while women waited to be selected.
I think that idea motivates a lot of women's behavior. And it's unfortunate because we don't really operate that way now. I've had relationships where I chose the person and I've had relationships where they chose me. And the one where the guy chooses definitely is a smoother path. But women are not just passively sitting, fanning themselves, waiting for someone to offer them a mint julep. Like, we're much more active in the process now.
Speak for yourself.
I think a lot of women's beauty rituals and interest in appearance that men actively make fun of us for is for this idea that I have to be the best one.
I think most of Instagram is based on women peacocking to try to get attention from men.
Yeah. And then that's who they get attention from. And then they'll sell you a blender.
They will probably instead sell you some sort of nail kit or hair extensions.
That's true.
Virginia, what did Plato think about all this?
Steve sent me a thing about the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who argued that the highest form of love was actually non-sexual, non-romantic attachment to another person's so-called brotherly love. Plato reasoned that since passion and romance and sex often make us do ridiculous things that we regret, the sort of passionless love between two family members or between two close friends was the height of virtuous human experience. In fact, Plato, like most people in the ancient world, looked upon romantic love with skepticism, if not absolute horror. In philosophy, they talked about how there's three kinds of love. There's platonic love, Plato, which is this one he's talking about. Two people who are not having sex but love each other very much. Brotherly love, the love of a god worship, which I think sometimes we experience when we're thinking about someone who we admire or a celebrity, which is weird.
Like Zeus.
Like Zeus. And then there's romantic love, which he thought he couldn't dirty his little gloves with.
Well, because I think it had something to do with women. According to Mark Manson, as with most things, Plato got it right before anybody else did. And this is why non-sexual love is often referred to as platonic love.
We have talked about Plato before because we've talked about the wandering uterus.
Yes.
And I think a lot of misogyny comes directly from Plato. He thought that hysteria was because a woman's uterus had gotten in the wrong place. It was a living entity that became angry when a woman did not get pregnant. A lot of super misogynist ideas were from Plato. A lot of good ideas too. And also, we've talked about how philosophy was one of the places where an incel would go in the past. I am going to put all of my energy into higher thought, not just because I am not being picked or do not want to be picked by a member of the opposite sex, but because it is morally superior for me to live on this mountain, giving out wisdom and living the life of the mind, rather than sullying myself with sexual congress with women.
And weird uteruses that are wandering.
Yes.
So Mark Manson said it's poor decision-making that made the ancients skeptical of romantic love's utility. Instead, many cultures treated it as some sort of unfortunate disease we all have to go through and get over in our lives, kind of like chickenpox. In fact, classic stories like the Iliad or Romeo and Juliet were not celebrations of love. They were warnings against the potential negative consequences of love, how romantic love can potentially ruin everything.
Romeo and Juliet, every high school English class learns it. It's not a good story. Everybody dies. It's not something to hitch your wagon to.
And it's so romantic.
It's so romantic that they were willing to die because they found someone attractive at a party who was part of a family that their family didn't like. Granted, they wanted her to marry Prince Paris. But you don't think that if this little girl had lived a little while longer, she might have found someone else she dug? Also, they're making these decisions when they're teenagers, when their brains aren't fully formed yet.
When I think about romantic love, I think it's just a bunch of hormones, and it is an illness. It wasn't until the industrial age that things began to change. People began to take up work in city centers and factories. Their income, and thus their economic future, was no longer tied to the land, and they were able to make money independent of their family. They didn't have to rely on inheritances or family connections the way that people did in the ancient world. And so the economic and political components of marriage ceased to make much sense.
Now, Plato was not as much of a misogynist as Aristotle, who thought that women were born to serve and were not good for anything else. He did think that in an ideal situation where a woman received the right education, she could one day be as good as a man. So thanks. And she could keep that womb from wandering about her body like some kind of a psychopath.
Speaking of womb wandering and women being psychopaths, Virginia, what do you know about the new economic realities of the 19th century? I may have sent you something.
In the 19th century, we're just coming into the Enlightenment, a very philosophical time. We're talking about individual rights and the pursuit of happiness. And the result was a full-blown age of romanticism. F the cattle, it was the 1800s and people's feelings suddenly mattered. This ties into the birth of our nation in 1776. We said we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are our integral rights.
Those are the inherent rights of every white man who owns land.
Who own property. It is a nice ideal if you can apply it to everybody. The new ideal was not only to marry for love, but that love was to live on in bliss for all of the eternity. Thus, it wasn't until the relatively recent 150 years ago that the ever popular, quote, happily ever after, quote, ideal was born. And that's a really rough ideal.
I think it's ruined a lot of people's lives.
Right.
This is what I find when I'm working with couples. They're like, where's this happily ever after? Where's this wedded bliss that people have been selling me on?
That is just an idea from 150 years ago. And I had a conversation probably in college that marriage doesn't exist because love lasts. It exists because it does not last. That Twitter-pated doves romantic love insanity does not last. And you still want to own property, raise children, be able to divide up belongings. You get married because you're going to fall out of that romantic love.
In some ways, I feel like the original concept of love was a better one because it set people up for success rather than what we're doing now. A few centuries ago, people hated romantic love. They were afraid of it, skeptical of its power, and wary of its ability to tilt everyone it touched into making bad choices. A couple of centuries ago, free from the confines of the farm and mom and dad's approving or disapproving hand, people then began to overestimate love. They idealized it and willed it to wash away all of their problems and pain forever. Medieval love in many ways was better. We need somebody to work the farm. We got to make some babies. We got to get the family line going.
Your individual desires are interesting, but we can't let it get in the way of our bigger plan.
And if you end up liking each other, cool. You don't need to love each other. You don't need to be obsessed with each other. You don't need to be Twitter-pated at all.
I have known people who've been in arranged marriages, which to the Western ear sounds so brutal. And I think for women and girls, many times it is. But I worked with a lady in Texas who had been married to her husband when she was 14 or 15. She was like, and I didn't like him at all. I grew to love him. And I think that's what matters. In the end, if a successful marriage is how long it lasts, she had a successful marriage. It lasted until he died. But what a beginning to just be forced, like, well, you're a girl, you don't really get any opinions.
I mean, the good news is you don't get kidnapped.
You don't get kidnapped. And she never had the fantasy of romantic love. She never had the fantasy of, I'm choosing him and we love each other. She was just thrown into the drudgery of childbirth and waiting on everybody in her life until she said, hey, this is pretty good.
And I feel like that, to me, that's a gift.
Right.
It's
setting sustain that.
Right. That's sustainable. And I'm not fighting expectations. My expectations are exactly what I'm getting. This is why I love watching, I think it's called The Indian Matchmaker on Netflix. These people are just, are you attractive enough for me to kiss? Do you have enough money to support me and help me out? Do we have similar ideas about family and goals? And that's
it. That's enough. When we talk about love making you do foolish things, it's also very romantic things. King Edward VIII abdicated the British throne because he was in love with an American socialite. I think from a royal perspective, that was the wrong decision. He messed with the royal throne. He messed with his bloodline.
Well, and he ended up completely upending a lot of people's lives. And if you've watched The Crown, which you know that I have, they didn't seem that happy. They were just getting drunk all the time. And then he ended up dying of cancer. So Mark Manson, who I believe is a married man, he said, people are just now starting to figure out that while love is great, that by itself, love is not enough. That was sort of a conclusion I arrived at when my marriage came to an end, because I did love him. Absolutely. But love is one component.
I think one of the things that works against modern women is we still have this very old idea drilled into us that's kind of an upper class idea that the goal is to become a trophy wife, that you're going to meet a guy who's going to not only be able to take care of himself, but who's going to be able to take care of you. And you're going to just raise children and write poetry and whatever else you want to do. That is a 1% thing. Most of us are going to choose partners, hopefully that make our lives better, that help fill our cup, that don't drain us and leave us exhausted with nothing for ourselves. But the idea that you're going to stop working because you meet a guy is a very 1950s idea. It's funny. I got married in 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. And I was working on a contract that was ending. So everybody knew I was engaged. And I also was leaving my position because the contract was in an end. And I had people asking me, oh, so you're getting married, so you're going to quit working? I'm like, what do you mean? We're middle class. Like, I'm going to work. Everybody's going to work. I think that part of our unhappiness with marriage is this expectation that this person is going to fix your life or carry the load for everybody, because they're barely going to carry themselves. It's much more realistic to say, I want to choose someone who's going to make my life better, who I can emotionally connect with, who I can share my life with, rather than this is my white knight.
And I was working with somebody this week who was saying, I have this husband who doesn't agree with me, is very defensive and kind of self-centered. And I said, well, welcome to being married to a man. They're all like this.
This is not unique. Tough talk. Who is this guy who has been raised in a society that is not this one? Because in order to be a better partner, they have to be raised in a society where they're not the center, where just being present and being male is not
good,
like
it's good enough.
It's good enough, right?
Yeah, I think that romance, what it has done to our society, is made women have wildly unrealistic expectations of partnership, and men too. I think that we're both sold a bill of goods. It's a different bill, but it's still inaccurate.
Women are sold, if he loves me, he's going to make all the money. He's
going to save me.
He's going to save me. He's going to save me from my crummy family. He's going to save me from my emotional problems. He's going to save me from bad impulses that I have. And then men, I think you're sold a bill of goods that I'm going to put this ring on her finger and she's going to have sex with me whenever I want. And she's going to make me dinner. And she's not going to want to have sex with anybody else.
I think women are looking for a daddy emotional support animal, and men are looking for a mommy bang maid.
I want to talk about something in general that annoys me when you see people posting about their partners and saying, he's my everything. He's my best friend. He's my confidant. He's my lover. He's the father of my children. Another person can't be everything for you.
No.
And it's crazy and unrealistic to think that they should.
And I feel like that's part of the way our society has changed. We don't have community anymore. We're putting a lot of pressure on our partner.
When your partner is asked to do everything, they're going to fail.
Absolutely.
And I also think that this is something that men complain about. Why is she telling me about her workday? Why is she telling me about her nail tech? Because you're all she has, brother.
Because our society tells us, specifically women, that we need to prioritize our marriage and our husband over everyone else in our life. And if that's the case, I'm letting all of my other relationships go. So I need you. You're my only thing.
Because we are trained to prioritize our romantic relationships, and because if we are married, we are taking on almost all domestic labor and child rearing, where is the space that we have for friends? Men make fun of it like, oh, you're having girls' night. Oh, you're having girls' brunch. And you've had the experience with women who were punished by their partners for seeking out time with their friends.
I was one of those women. I got in trouble every time I left my husband for 5 seconds to do anything without him. According to the triangular theory of love developed by psychologist Robert Sternberg, the 3 components of love necessary are intimacy, passion, and commitment. Intimacy encompasses feelings of attachment, closeness, connectedness, and bondedness. Passion encompasses drives connected to both limerence and sexual attraction. Commitment encompasses, in short term, the decision to remain with another, and in the long term, the shared achievements and plans made with the other person. It's kind of like a stool. You need to have all 3 of those things for it to be successful.
When you compare people with new marriages and old marriages, a lot of times, if you talk to a woman who's having an affair with a married man, he'll tell her the intimacy and passion is gone, but their commitment is still present, right?
Right. So they have 2 legs, but they don't have the third. I've seen all of these where they'll have 2 of them. So they'll have commitment and they'll have intimacy, but they won't have passion. That's generally the one that goes first. Because passion requires 8 hours of sleep, not working all the time, not raising children. And
it requires effort. When you are first with someone, passion is easy and it feels like an endless supply. When you have seen them toot naked.
I was going to say, when you've seen them with the flu.
Oh boy. Yeah. When you've seen the ins and outs of just their meat case, getting sick and having problems. You got to stoke the fires themselves. So many things that were brought up to think, well, if this just doesn't happen naturally or organically and all the time, it's not for you. I think that is an expectation that sets us up for failure. I knew a woman, very funny comic, and she was my age, but emotionally very immature. And she said, when I stop being super attracted to my partner, that's when I know it's just time to go and get another one. And I'm like, oh, so you've never had a relationship.
Right.
You're just having these
Flings, basically.
flings over and over again.
Right. Elizabeth Kane, professor at South University, said, to be romantic is to make a choice to wake up each day and ask yourself what you can do today to let your lover know that they are adored. Have fun in your romance and remember that the more effort you put into your romantic relationship, the more love you will receive in return. Be the partner that you seek and live a life filled with passion and romance.
That is really nice. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently who was talking about marriage, and people talk about, oh, marriage is hard. Yeah, because you're just two people. There's nothing magical holding it together. You're two people who are making a decision. But she said, I get up every morning and I choose my husband, and hopefully he chooses me. Every morning I commit to it and I say, what are we going to do? How am I going to show this person that I care for him? And he does the same for me. And that's the core of it. I think that's really good advice.
I remember finding out that Rod Stewart, every 10 years, he and his wife sit down and have a conversation about whether they want to stay married.
And that sounds scary to someone who hasn't been married, but to someone who has, I think that's a really great practice. I think the thing to avoid in relationships is taking each other for granted. And I think this is something that I definitely did in my marriage and that you may have done. I'm like, well, you're stuck with me, so you're going to put up with whatever behavior I dish out.
I think I used up all the bad partnership stuff in the first decade.
That's an amazing gift. That's an amazing gift. I'm still learning. I think that once I got married, I'm like, well, all the wheels are off. All the cards are on the table.
I'm going to blow snot on your pillow and you're just going to have to deal with it.
I didn't do it every day.
So you may be wondering, is romantic love a sociocultural construct? Could it be that how we define love says more about our society and culture than it does about absolute and universal concepts of true love?
This is from an article, What is Romantic Love? For instance, intimacy is an important element of romantic love, but what we consider intimate relationships in America arose in the early 19th century. They did so in the context of rapid modernization and urbanization and the separation of the world of home from the world of work. As one author put it, individualism and intimacy are the Siamese twins of modernization. So individualism, that's a very hyper-American ideal that my needs are more important than everyone else's needs, that my needs are more important than the royal family's needs or what my dad wants.
It's hard to have emotional intimacy when I'm also obsessed with my individualism. I think vulnerability comes from really, truly being in partnership. And I think if I have this individualistic dog eat dog, myself first, it's hard to have that.
Okay, I'm going to argue that in this context, what this author is saying is that individualism and intimacy are what is changing relationships from you're in a village, you get married, you make a house on the same street as your parents, you continue to operate in this communal way.
Right.
But because you're an individual and your needs come first, you can move away from that family. And because you have intimacy with your partner, you don't need as much from the communal group. And that's what makes modern life possible. You're not living on a farm with everyone you've ever known your whole life.
Right. Exactly. The author is Arash Emamzadeh. Virginia, in closing, what are your final thoughts on this very romantic topic?
First of all, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. What'd you get me? Huh?
There's a lot of expectations
for gift giving,
for gift giving for you,
for me,
that I guess I hadn't considered as part of being on a podcast with you.
That's how this works.
So I want to talk about Valentine's Day as an idea. And yes, it's a made up holiday, but guess what? Every holiday is made up. If you as a partner have truly been thinking about your romantic partner all year long and giving them little gifts and doing them little favors and being sweet, no, you probably don't need to do something special for Valentine's Day. But most of you haven't.
I think you do need to do something about Valentine's Day because I think it's important to acknowledge special occasions and have some sort of decorum around that.
And to acknowledge that your love is a gift and a miracle. And it's a miracle that you're both working on and investing in.
And something that you have gratitude about.
People, and when I say people, I mean men, who I hear talking about, oh, Valentine's Day is just another day. I shouldn't have to do anything special. You're not being special the rest of the year. Oh, you can surprise your girlfriend with flowers whenever you want. When's the last time you did that? What about doing that? It's not the exchange of currency. It's proving to someone that you think about them. You've had a moment of thinking about what they would like. And it's an opportunity to give gifts and to exchange a moment of intimacy. Don't complain about it.
I think it's a way of showing gratitude. If you think about all those TikToks with women with empty stockings, that's a moment where just with a very small amount of effort, somebody could have made a huge difference in their marriage.
Romance is not the end all be all, but boy, oh boy, what would we have film and television about?
And music.
Songs.
Every song is about romance.
This is an important core value for humans, and romantic love is not the end all be all. If you don't have romantic love, you can have a good life in a lot of ways. Please don't feel like this is all there is to life, but it's important.
For me, platonic love seems to be the one that's more consistent. You and I were both interviewed recently by our listener, Joe Erickson, for his podcast, History Dance Club. During the interview, we were talking about my choice to not date anymore.
Right.
And he was saying, well, what do you think it is about the people you've dated? And I said, I have exclusively dated alcoholics and abusers.
It's not a big sacrifice for me.
No, I'm not rushing to have more of that. But when I think about my platonic relationships, those are the ones that have always fed me. Those are the ones that I've been able to rely on. And so those are the ones that I put my energy towards. Well, my wife doesn't know this yet, but I'm sending my wife a Valentine's card this year.
Nice. Yes, romance is made up and something that we have incorporated into the human experience to trick women into marrying poor people. But I think it's not all bad. Laura, what are your last thoughts on this topic?
My final thoughts on this topic are, I think romance is fun, but same as you, let's not put all of our eggs in that basket. I think we need to remember that it's going to wane at some point and we have to fill that. Even when it's not coming from us naturally. Romance is based on a bunch of chemicals that happen at the beginning of a relationship. To me, over time, as relationships evolve, romance can be just gratitude and showing the person that you care about them. And in the immortal words of Shania Twain, we need to sometimes remind our partner that they're still the one.
Laura, if people are interested in hearing more of your thoughts or maybe seeing promotional items for this podcast or going into your therapy practice, well, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, there's a few places. They can find me at my professional website, lauraryan.org. They can also find information about the podcast at mysistersatherapist.com. They can find us on our Instagram page, My Sister's a Therapist. And if they want to see my incredibly unprofessional and immature TikTok account, they can go to I'm Laura Ryan. Virginia, how can people find you on these internets?
You can still find me on Instagram, everybody. I'm at Badinia, Badinia. I had a panic attack when I was backstage and TikTok went black, but it's back and I'm back. And you can find me at Badinia on TikTok. You can also just find my website, badinia.com. And I've got a lot of promotional stuff and stuff that I've written, links to other places where I am on the internet, an opportunity to buy a beanie with my logo on it, all kinds of stuff. And that's wawawa.badinia.com. Laura, now is the time of the podcast where you sometimes read a review or a letter or a missive, a love note that someone has sent us. Do you have one this week?
Yes, in fact, I do. This was a surprise review that I found on Amazon, which I didn't realize people could review our podcast on Amazon. But someone has, gratefully, and that person is R. Tice. And it says, discover why people react in ways you wouldn't expect just by listening to an entertaining podcast. Therapist sister is clearly well-versed in her field, and comedian sister is a gifted conversationalist. So I find this podcast to be my particular cup of tea. Each episode weaves seamlessly between informative readings on the week's topic and relevant anecdotal stories, leaving me with the feeling that I've had a meaningful conversation without ever opening my mouth. This podcast is fantastic for those times when I have mindless tasks to accomplish or ambient noise to cover, so I naturally binged my way through a year of episodes and now eagerly await drop day to get my next... Oh dear, I'm using addiction language. Perhaps Laura will be so kind as to tell me whether my obsession with my sister's a therapist is healthy or requires an intervention. R. Tice, thank you so much. I'm going to say this is a great addiction. You should keep it coming because we have episodes every Thursday.
That's right. Artice, thank you very much for a beautiful review. I want to remind the listener that if you would like to reach out to us, you can always reach us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. You can send us compliments, vegan casserole ideas, show ideas, any notes that you have. You can also write us at hireus@mysistersatherapist.com. If you would like to help us promote a product, if you would like us to make a public appearance, we're very much able and willing to do so. Drop us a note sometime. And in the words of the immortal Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn, we can make it, baby.
Me and you.
Bye-bye. And happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.